We'll move to the administration question and answer period. Councilors, any questions for the administration? I have one listed here from Councilor Sanchez.
Mr. President, thank you. I'd like to have a few questions, and I'd like to ask the administration a few questions, specifically Chief Gene Gallegos of the Fire Department first. And the question that I'd like to ask Chief Gallegos is he still here? Is he on?
Councilor Sanchez, yes, sir. I am on.
Okay, thank you. Chief, how are you doing today? As we spoke earlier, I'm basically going to ask the question that I asked you the other day when we spoke. And the question is in reference to last meeting's question about the qualifications of the deputy chiefs and how that went and what your hiring process finally was, and if you stayed with the 10 original applicants. If you can answer that question, please.
Council President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, thank you so much for that question. And it's, again, moving forward, yes, we have concluded the process for the selection of the deputy chiefs. I did send my recommendations to city administration, and they did agree with all of them, which all of them fall within Section 200. So now I do have a full executive staff that will be starting effective this Saturday, the 12th. Again, my entire department is extremely excited to move forward with our selections. Again, all of the members are extremely well respected. They fall within Section 200. Again, originally we did open it up because, for an example, all 5 of these deputy chiefs, even though they're all deputy chiefs, each one of the positions has a specific skill sets that are unique to each position. And again, an example of one of them is planning, logistics, and finance, where there was only one person that was interested in it. And I'm not saying that he wasn't a bad selection, because he is. We did offer him the position. He accepted, and he's going to do an amazing job moving forward. But again, just opening it up to drop those qualifications of a bachelor's degree to give somebody else that might have, during these weird times, not finished that degree, but they're a shooting star. So they would have been able to possibly finish it if, we didn't have these weird times over the last couple of years. But in the end, everybody that fell within Section 200 and that were the original 10 applicants, those are all the ones that were selected from. So, I'm excited to move forward. I'm excited that the executive staff is in place. That's city administration, again, approved of all of the recommended candidates. And that's where we're at right now.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it. Wanted to see if there's anyone else that had any comments or concerns in reference to what happened. I'm really glad that you actually stayed with the original Section 200 to make sure that the qualifications that were in place and were used to actually for the selection process. And I really like seeing that these kinds of things do happen that way, because it really, as my time in police department, we actually used to have this, it really opened up a can of worms when you actually dealt with something that wasn't actually in the qualifications before, and even up into lawsuits. And I just wanted to make sure that if we end up changing anything or things do change in the future, that you actually get everybody involved that would really, really have a say in making these changes. So if you can include everybody, that's awesome, because I'm really glad that we stuck with it. And if anybody else has any comments, I'd definitely like to hear them from City Council.
Council President Ben. Sorry.
Council President with your hands raised. Chief, did you have something else?
No, Councilor Sanchez, President Benton, no, thank you. And I know that these questions have come up, and so my department was asking questions as well. And in the end, I want to say that regardless of my decision, again, that we stuck with Section 200, every applicant was able to, really dive in deep and educate themselves on the department and the intricacies of our department. So it really educated all of 22 candidates that were opened up after the fact. And again, making us a better department as a whole, because those other candidates, they had to actually really prove themselves to even be considered. So in the end, it actually improved our departments. Again, this was just a temporary waiver, but to see if there was that shooting star. But in the end, it's Section 200 was the one that we stuck with, and I'm excited to move forward.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Sanchez, you had a question for APD as well?
Yes, Mr. President, I do. I actually have three questions for APD, and wanted to see if it'll also open up some discussion. And the first question that I wanted to bring up, and three questions, I'll go over it real quick. One is reference the administration or appointed staff pay raises. The second question is the police administration taking back the city? And the third question is appointed positions and morale. First question, I'm really impressed with the fact that the officers are getting an 8% increase for the rest of 2022, 5% for 2023, and also longevity pay and stability pay for staying in the area command, which helps with community policing. And some of the big things that I think are the big ticket items at APD is reducing crime, building up officers in the field. That's where the citizens need them, and also work to move forward and eventually out of DOJ mandate. So I wanted to just go into the first question is the administration appointed positions at APD, and we have 9 chief staff, we have 14 deputy commanders and 12 commanders, for a total of 36 people that are actually assigned to APD. Never seen that before. In my tenure at APD, we only had 6 chief staff members making money, or actually assigned to the chief. You had your chief, you had your public safety commander, then you had your deputy chiefs, and which usually amounted to about 5 or 6, and now we're up to 36 individuals who are under the chief staff. And my question is, are these people getting raises like the officers, and what percentage of are those raises, Mr. President?
Chief.
President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, this is Chief Medina, and I'll start with the number of upper positions at the Albuquerque Police Department. During the past several years, the number has grown. When the administration first came in 2017, the goal was to reduce the number of individuals that were at the highest ranks. When I came in, that was one of my goals, because I too remembered the APD of the past, as you referred to, Councilor Sanchez. APD has drastically changed. A lot of that change has to do with our court-approved settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. For example, when you speak of 14 deputy commanders is a way for us to pay somebody less to do the work that is required of a commander under the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement was in place prior to this administration coming back, and one of the things that it requires is that a use of force have a command level review. Command is somebody above the rank of lieutenant who's appointed and who obviously is able to make the command level decisions on if use of force was within policy or not within policy. Instead of hiring 4 commanders to do this, we hired 4 deputy commanders to try to save some money. And we also did hire 4 deputy commanders from the outside of the agency for the most part. DOJ has been very receptive of this. The settlement agreement and the monitors, it's in line with the settlement agreement. The monitors like the fact that we have outsiders who are now ruling on uses of force due to the fact that there was perceived that many times that internally individuals weren't holding people accountable. But it also is a way for us to add resources to the police department because of our shortage. One of the benefits of the deputy commanders is I think that most of council would agree that at these higher levels where we're holding people accountable, it is easier for us to have people that are no longer part of the same collective bargaining unit that is receiving the discipline, that is hashing out the discipline, and that's been a sense of contention within the community and within the settlement process that we're kind of overseeing our own from the same collective bargaining agency. Right now, of our 12 deputy commanders we have hired, because we actually have 12 hired, 11 are externally and 1 is internally. The question sometimes comes up, is there still opportunities from those from within? Yes, absolutely. In terms of commanders, there is currently 8 commanders, 6 from within, 2 from outside, but we have 5 that are getting ready to be promoted later this week or next week, and all 5 that are getting promoted, 4 are currently with APD and 1 has returned from a brief retirement period. Is there some places that we did bring in talent as we needed? Absolutely. Our investigation units, homicide, we struggled with homicides for a long time. We found somebody who had a good skill set at the DA's office. The only way we could bring this individual in was at a deputy commander position. I think that the success of homicide over the last 6 weeks speaks for itself, as I think we're at 14 arrests, and I just signed travel paperwork on another one for a case from the past that we're trying to clear. And I believe later this week we'll be traveling to another state for another one. So we're hoping to have 2 to 3 more homicides cleared up in the next couple of weeks. And we did bring in outside talent for that. In terms for raises, we always have to keep in mind that we cannot have compaction. That means that lieutenants cannot be making nearly as much as a commander or deputy commander, because why is somebody going to take that step of losing their overtime abilities to get a promotion? They were given, I believe, 6% raise everybody the rank of deputy commander and above, now that the officers just got their raise also. The officers are slated to get an additional raise in July. It's unknown if the staff will get a raise above the rank of lieutenant, and also anybody that has been, as we stated earlier, in Field Services Bureau for more than 3 years in the collective bargaining agreement can make up to $5,200. That's 1 point, actually 4 years, but that staff is not eligible for those raises above the rank of lieutenant or bonuses that other members will be getting. President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, I hope this answers everything in those 2 questions you asked about the ranks above the rank of lieutenant, deputy commanders, and commanders, and also answers the question why we have so many people at those ranks now. Big part of it is the settlement agreement and the question about the raises. Any further questions on that, Councilor Sanchez?
Councilor Benton, yes, I do have another follow-up in reference to that. You talked about adding resources, and adding resources means that we need boots on the ground. And having deputy commanders is not boots on the ground when the deputy commanders are making double what a police officer makes. And I also had the other question as to how much they are making versus the police officer that we need on the streets, which is going to mean that the officers have service, maybe some 911 call operators added. Those are the things that we really, really need so that the citizens of Albuquerque can see the officers on the streets and feel protected. And I think that's where we need to be looking. Adding resources means adding resources where we can see them, and the public needs to see them out there. And so my question was, did the upper appointed positions get raises, and how much was it? That's the question. That's one of the questions I asked, but it wasn't covered.
President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, I believe I said it was a 6% raise that the upper ranks got, and that we didn't know if they were going to be getting that raise in July. And we could talk about resources and services, and I think those are 2 different questions. In terms of services, there are many ways, and things that we need to do to ensure that the citizens of Albuquerque continue to get increased services from the police department. This ranges everywhere from the records management system that we're implementing to make sure that officers clear calls faster, to bringing in individuals who are clearing more of the property crimes type cases with property crime technicians who can take the fingerprints, take the police reports. There's other things we've done, such as the video unit, which goes out. They obtain video from crime scenes so officers aren't bogged down in looking for video. Increased staffing at the telephone report unit for non-essential calls, increasing the time frames so that we cover 7 days a week and more periods in a day. There are many ways that we're addressing how to make sure that the citizens get better response. As for staffing levels and increasing staffing levels at those higher ranks, and it does have a direct impact on staffing levels on the field. If these individuals were not brought in from the outside, we'd have actually potentially lost 12 more boots on the ground, and those individuals would no longer be taking calls for service, and it has a trickle-down effect. Every time you promote 12 lieutenants to the rank of commander or deputy commander, you lose 11 sergeants or 12 sergeants to backfill those lieutenants. Those sergeants then have to be backfilled by officers, and that directly has an impact on the amount of officers. So what we did is we actually did keep boots on the ground, and we did make a difference where we were able to keep resources in the field to help alleviate some of the strain that we have in getting to calls or investigations more quickly.
Councillor Ben, I have another question to follow up with that. And right now, APD has gone to 12-hour shifts. And on the bid, I showed that 376 officers were bid in field services. And out of those 376 officers, that's not including all the officers on the ground. It's including the officers, sergeants, lieutenants, and also the commander for the area command, which in my calculation means that we only have about 5 officers per squad once you break that 376 all the way down. And then making sure that we're at 12-hour shifts is not showing that we've closed the back door. So what are we doing to close the back door so these officers don't leave? I show that we have 178 officers by APD spokesman, 178 officers left in 2021 and 99 left in 2020. So what are we doing to close the back door? And what I'm looking at is still don't see a reason why we should be financing the appointed positions when the actual officers in the field are lacking support and and the citizens are lacking that protection from the officers who drive a marked unit and police car and are in uniform out in the field.
President Benton, Councillor Sanchez, the numbers I just received for the number of individuals assigned to the Field Services Bureau equals 514 individuals assigned to field services. Of that, it includes 1 deputy chief, 4 patrol commanders, 12 patrol lieutenants, 46 individuals who are on their last phase of OJT training that ends on Friday, 3 PRT lieutenants, 6 PRT sergeants, 30 PRT officers, 3 of which are bikes in the southeast, 2 CIT lieutenants, 2 CIT sergeants, 16 CIT officers, field services impact sergeant 1, field service impact officers 17 more bike patrol officers, 47 patrol sergeants, and patrol officers at 427. There are several things we've done to increase our visibility in the community. One of the things that we did in 2018, we changed our take-home policy program so that our officers could utilize their vehicles more in an attempt to ensure that we could keep more visibility in the community. We all know that a marked unit in the community out and about is a deterrent to crime, and we want to support that, and we want to continue to ensure that our officers have take-home cars, and number 2, that they're able to utilize them to increase their presence in the community. I think that answers the question about the number of officers out in the field, what we're doing to keep them from leaving. APD is no different than any other agency. State in Mexico, New Mexico State Police is down 100 state police officers. Earlier, just last Monday, I testified in Santa Fe to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they brought up that very question of how come APD is so short. We responded, and how come the state of New Mexico is so short? And a lot of times people want to blame the settlement agreement. They want to blame the administration. But one of the biggest things I'm hearing from my officers is, number one, is the change in some of the state laws, and the support that they received locally has made them change their mind, and they want to leave the state. Most of our applicants didn't leave the city of Albuquerque to another agency within the state of New Mexico. Those either left the career as a whole or left to the state of Texas for whatever reason that may be. Number two, the vast majority of our people who left, numbers-wise, like, were retirements. That could have been expected. In 2018, the city of Albuquerque and the administration gave the best compensation packet they had given in years. Anybody who's familiar with our para knows that 2021 August, when you started to see the spike in our retirements, was the 3-year mark, almost to the date, that our laterals and individuals who came in 2018 got a new high 3, and the retirements that we prolonged in 2019 and 20 came to fruition in 2021. What are we doing to keep people on the back end more is we did increase over the years. We've increased the number of longevity pay that our officers get as they go up the ranks. We are creating more opportunity. Eventually, a lot of these deputy commander positions could be filled internally, we're hoping. We are working to continue to increase pay at all levels to hopefully get people to take a new high 3. And one of the biggest things we did to try to maintain officer retention is when I became interim chief, the first thing I did is I asked Commander Zach Cottrell to look at our disciplinary matrix. We know that our officers were being disciplined extremely harshly under this settlement agreement. Wasn't the DOJ's fault. It wasn't the monitor's fault. In ways, it was APD's fault that we hadn't come up with the disciplinary matrix that recognized misconduct versus mistake. That process was changed in June of 2021. And since then, the number of disciplinary cases that our officers are facing has been reduced. And just last week, Zach Cottrell told me after a meeting with the Department of Justice and the monitors that they were quite impressed and happy that the number of disciplinary and IA cases is going down, and the severity of those cases is also going down. There was going to be a rough point in time that we had to hit in terms of discipline to get past the fear of discipline, as the monitoring reports pointed out. I truly feel we're beyond that. We fixed our matrix, and I think that this will go into your last question is, it's a good time that our officers has to recognize there is no more excuses. We have a duty to keep this city safe, and they need to go back to work, and we've made most of the changes they need. There is one pending item that we have to do for officer retention to keep morale up, and we have to continue to work. We're in the early stages of changing our level 1 use of force investigations, which currently take approximately 5 hours. The Justice Department and the monitoring team have been very supportive in us trying to make these changes. The first submission has been sent to DOJ. They sent their comments back, and APD in the process of trying to respond to their comments to see if we could get the ball moving in changing that. As I meet with our officers every day, every month, I just had an officer breakfast last week, and the number one concern, without a doubt, over and over the last couple of months has been staffing levels. When I started these meetings almost 14 months ago, the number one issue officers were bringing up over and over again was discipline in the Department of Justice settlement agreement. That seems to have shifted in the past few months, and our officers are looking to increase their ranks, and the shortage of the officers is the biggest concern that we're hearing right now.
Yeah. Councilor Sanchez, we have some other councilors, I think, probably still wanting to speak with the chief, if that's all right. And
sure. I've only gone through the first 2 questions. I still have one more, but go ahead, councilors, and we can get back on it. Thank you.
We'll circle back to you just to allow some other questions, if these are for the chief. Councilor Jones, followed by Councilor Bassan, followed by Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Sanchez, great work, and Chief Medina, thank you. I'm far more simplistic than you and Councilor Sanchez because I don't understand how this works. But the number one complaint that I get from every citizen on the street, whether they're in my district or other districts, or when I walk into a store or meet someone on the sidewalk, the number one question is, and comment is, we are afraid to leave our homes. We won't go out at night. The carjackings, the violence, what we see going on at our department stores, unchecked. Walmart is like a free-for-all rummage sale. They're walking out, the criminals are walking out of the stores with armloads and shopping carts. It's one thing to steal the shopping carts, but now they're unchecked in keeping those shopping carts full of everything, electronic equipment, clothing, whatever they can sell. And we see no stop nor no slowdown. Actually, I see more of it, and I hear more complaints. I see complaints about more loitering in front of the stores, which makes customers nervous, and therefore customers don't shop. We've just gone through, and we're still going through, a terrible time in our city for the citizens who own businesses, both retail and every kind of business, and the people who need to get back to work and make the city work. Chief, do you have a plan? And if so, I don't need to hear from it now, but if you would be willing to meet offline with me and maybe a couple other counselors and tell us, what are we doing to get officers back in the stores where they are needed? And then the next one is, do we have ability? And I know that we have gone to the courts about the pedestrian safety ordinance, but now we have an issue of being approached in every parking lot, every retail store, every place where we get out of a car, and being approached in some of our citizens are very frightened of this, asking for money, handouts. What are we doing? What is your plan? And again, you don't have to answer now, Chief, but I would like to see something, hear something from you in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if you would, please. And if you want to see something now, please do. But I see our city, we're a snowball rolling to hell, and we are looking worse every day, and our city should not have to be like that. Our citizens, I know people my age with good business background, own their businesses. They are shutting down, selling their businesses, and moving to states around us. So it's not just Albuquerque, it's the entire state. But we can't let this happen. We want to keep our children in the city, in the state, and it won't happen if this continues much longer.
President Benton, Councillor Jones, that's a great question. And I'm going to break that into 2 parts for the short answer. And if you want to meet later offline, we could talk about more specifics. I'm going to break that into number 1, first being the big, huge crime issue that we're seeing within the city of Albuquerque. The second being the impact we're seeing on businesses at different levels and what we're doing to address those. First of all, the crime wave that's hitting the city of Albuquerque is no different than the crime wave hitting most of this nation right now. But there are a number of factors that go into this. Sometimes people say COVID's driven this. Yes, COVID has an effect, but also the broken criminal justice system in the state of New Mexico has an effect. I've been in Santa Fe fighting, and I need every city councilor's help on some of these measures. There are some common sense measures in there. Enhancements for individuals committing a crime armed with a firearm. The same business crimes you are speaking about, I spoke about last Monday in Santa Fe, and I told the Senate Judiciary, we have to get tough on individuals who commit a crime and brandish a firearm. We are seeing this. We saw it twice the next day. An individual in a stolen motor vehicle brandishes a firearm, and we have an officer-involved shooting. We have somebody try to get apprehended at Walmart. They fire shots. Just yesterday, look at the news, and we had an individual try to commit a robbery, a shoplifting, turn robbery at a local Smith's, and they get in a fight over the gun. We need Santa Fe to listen to the city of Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico, and we need a few get tough on crime bills. I'm going to be very blunt about this. It's not a bad thing to say, but I think that we all have to realize there are substance abusers that we need to get help. We need to get them help. We need to get them in treatment. We need to do everything to help these substance abusers. But the moment somebody becomes violent and carries a weapon or a firearm and threatens others, quite frankly, as a state, we need to have those people sit in jail. That's the most appropriate place for them. I hate to be this way, but it's the truth. Enough is enough within the city, but a lot of these changes cannot occur. The mayor had the Metro Crime Initiative last year. We have a lot of recommendations on there. We worked with all the parts of the criminal justice system to come up with some recommendations. And now we need our legislators to step up and to enact some of these legislations that is wanted by the people in the city of Albuquerque. So you have my commitment that we'll continue to work hard. We implemented a new tracking system. Like I stated earlier, when we changed the disciplinary process in June, we kind of went through a rough fall. We had 4 officers shot, and we went through an election season. It's seeing it firsthand as a chief. It's a lot different hearing about it than actually going through it. And now that we've came out, the first thing I did is I sat down the deputy chief of the field and investigations, and I said, everybody needs to get back to work now. There's no more excuses. And since January 1st, when we implemented our new tracking mechanism, we've about doubled felony arrests. We've doubled traffic arrests. We've doubled in a lot of areas, but we also have to make sure that the numbers are true, that they're accurate, and we're hoping that our new technology is going to make it a whole lot easier for track. The number one concern I hear from officers is the hard-working officers are tired of the lazy officers, and they want us to make sure that sergeants are holding them accountable. In terms of the businesses, one of the things that happened under the previous chief, special order was signed that gave a lot of rules to McClendon. I've had McClendon readdressed by the city attorney's office. Deputy Chief Brown sat with the field, and they addressed this with the field commanders and got the word out. Just for example, the week before, I think 233 misdemeanor arrests. There is ways to work through McClendon. It's this simple, and I'm gonna make it as simple as possible so we all understand it. Somebody doesn't want an individual on their property. That individual should not be allowed to remain on their property. We actually looked through video and found APD officers who were saying, there's nothing I could do. And they left the person there. I was just as disgusted as the deputy chief when we reviewed this. And we put our foot down to our officers. They will take enforcement action. If they go out to these properties and somebody's on there that shouldn't be on there, they should ask them to leave. And if they were already asked to leave and refuse, they should at the minimum receive a citation. If they refuse to still leave after receiving that citation, then McClendon allows them to be handcuffed and taken to jail, and they should be taken to jail. I can't control anything beyond that, but we will continue to issue misdemeanor citations. I think the week before, and I haven't looked at this week's statistics, they also issued 133 misdemeanor citations. We will continue to push our officers and not let them use the Justice Department settlement or any other things going on to make excuses as why they are not out there enforcing these laws and using some of these processes as a crutch. They need to take enforcement action. It's the administration's job to be tough and push our officers and make sure they're getting their work done. And I've seen a stark difference in our commanders and them pushing their officers. And just to let you know how the raise worked out for me, as a manager, I brought in all the commanders and I explained to them my disappointment that they needed to push their people harder. And when I was a commander, what I accepted and what I didn't accept. And I told them they were going to be held accountable. And after they took a tough conversation about how they are at the forefront of making sure officers are out there doing their job every day, I finished that conversation up with, I have faith in you. And that's why the administration is giving you your 6% raise. And we hope that you go forward, you earn it, and that you make sure that our officers are doing their job the best they can. So, you know what? Giving individuals a raise sometimes has the ability to also us utilize it to make sure that we use it as a means to inspire and to get our individual to do their job better.
If I may, Mr. President, very quickly.
Please.
And thank you, Chief. I appreciate what you're saying. However, that does not help the people who are afraid to leave their homes. There are any number of people now who are afraid to leave their homes, whether it be in a car or just to go out to get the mail, because now they're being accosted at their mailboxes in neighborhoods where you wouldn't think that would be happening. I would again like to speak with you one-on-one and see what you think we can do and if there's anything City Council can help with. And I think if the city needs to throw money at this and you have a good enough plan that you can convince it will help, I think we have to do it because we are losing citizens. We are losing our greatest product, which is our young people. They're not sticking around in Albuquerque or New Mexico. So anything we can do, it is a tremendous issue and will take our state down and take us back 20 years if we don't do something about it soon. So not just the city, but the state. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councillor Bassan and then Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a few follow-up questions to some of the answers and responses to Councillor Sanchez's questions. And first, Councillor Davis and Benton and I have been working really hard on reworking the CPOA ordinance. And I think that that's something that I'm hopeful is going to help find some balance on that middle ground, which will, I think, really move us forward into getting out of some of the thumb that we're under when it comes to the DOJ without compromising the idea that our officers need to make sure that they do not use excessive force and that they're doing everything that got us here in the first place. We got to make sure to fix. So I'm really hopeful at that. But what I wanted to do, a couple different things. For the public, I think it's important. I mean, I'm assuming it's pretty obvious, but at the same time, when you say that you're pulling in people externally versus internally, can you just make sure to clarify that for people that are watching?
Council President Benton, Councillor Bassan, yes, we are pulling in people externally and internally through the ranks.
But what does externally mean? I'm assuming that means from out of the state, out of the department, and internally means that you're promoting them from within APD?
President Benton, Councillor Bassan, yes. We have, for example, 2 deputy commanders from Rio Rancho. One had experience in the crime lab. We're very young and experienced at the crime lab. One went out to the crime lab. There's a lot of administrative duties out at SOD that are related to the settlement agreement, the gathering of statistics, reports. We brought in a deputy commander from Rio Rancho who's assisting in SOD to make sure that we're in compliance with that. We also brought in a crime fighter. During the past few years, we've had a lot of success with auto theft. We're going through a slight hiccup now because our bait cars are down. We're having trouble with individuals remaining in custody. They're working on that. But our best partner during that process was Office of Superintendent Insurance and State Police. The State Police lead that was in charge of the State Police auto theft team in Albuquerque, he joined our team and now he's part of the APD auto theft team. So vast majority have gone to compliance, but there are a couple of key people that we've brought with their expertise to help us on the crime fighting side.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And then how often do, let's say, the deputy commanders work in the field? Or is it pretty much solely administrative work?
President Benton, Councillor Bassan, it just depends on the position itself. In terms of even just look at a commander. The field commanders, they spend time in the field. The field deputy chief, he drives out in the field. I'll go out and I'll show up to calls every so often. But you have investigative deputy chiefs and commanders that they'll go out to investigations in the field. The night that we had the 3 homicides in January of this year, I went out at 4 a.m. The deputy chief texted me at 5 and said, "Hey, I just got to the first command post," and we had a conversation. The new commander of investigations has been to most of the homicides. So there are positions, the SOD deputy commander has the ability to go out and will go out during call-outs, but there are some positions where it's not wise for them to go out. A use of force deputy commander who's reviewing use of force, they may go out for an interview of somebody who used use of force, but the vast majority of their work is reviewing and in kind of an internal affairs function. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense or be wise for them to be out there and potentially expose themselves to a situation. So yes, they have to stay in tune with what's going on. They have to stay in tune with what's going on at the ground level. But there are just different nature of different positions that spend more or less time in the field.
Thanks, Chief. And 2 more questions. You said there's currently on your list 514 field services
Personnel.
Personnel. Okay, because I'm like, it's not just officers from that list that you gave us. So is that 514 personnel that are actively working each week, or is this going to include some that are on leave, some that, for whatever, if they're ill, different reasons? Is that 514 that are rotating currently on a 7-day basis, 3 shifts per day, or is it including all of the others who are also not actively working at this time for whatever multitude of reasons?
President Benton, Councilor Bazan, I'll have to get back to see if any of those individuals are military leave or extended family medical leave. As you're aware, both of those are situations where we may lose somebody for an extended period of time. I don't have that information with me currently, but the administration will get that information over to council so that they have that information and they know.
That'd be awesome, Chief. And then my last one is, and this would just be great. This is just a request because I feel like I'm kind of always behind the curve when it comes to figuring out exactly how many, what we call boots on the ground, right? And how many are actively working in the field. And I realize it's 7 days a week, 3 shifts per day. So to me, people are asking me very often, even going back to traffic and the traffic unit and how many are working. And it's like, well, last I heard it was, forgive me, because this is not really a quote, but 6 to 11 was where I was at, somewhere in there. And I realized that 6 to 11, when you're dividing it amongst a whole week, that's not a lot. So I would like to request, if possible, if there's a way for us to get some very informal, it doesn't have to be any kind of fancy PowerPoint or anything, but, and just even emailed to us, not necessarily an update at a council meeting, but where do we stand monthly with, how many field services, how many boots on the ground are working for us and defending the people in their yards and going to their mailboxes and going out to eat at a restaurant and all of these things. How many people are we counting on every month? And then updating it, because I think that in hindsight, I recognize I've asked in the past, how many are we expecting, which I'm also kind of asking now. How many are we expecting out of the next academy? But how many are we expecting to leave? And at this point, I'm not even asking how many are we expecting to leave. How many left last month? Let's start doing it that way, because I think that would be really beneficial for us to advocate for the police department and also to be held accountable and answer to our constituencies. How many do we expect? How many do we currently have really working? And how many are going to be leaving or have left this last month, so that we can kind of, in hindsight, keep track of those numbers?
President Benson, Councilor Bazan, that's a great question. And we actually have all of that. We have numbers to indicate like how many people are expected to hit the 20-year mark, because it's very complicated when you talk about how many people are expected to leave. Nobody's required to leave at 20 years. You have some people who want to stay beyond the 20 years. So we do know this, that 2022 and 2023 are extremely favorable in the number of people who are hitting the 20-year mark. It's right around 30 each year. So we're really looking at this as this is a year where we could increase numbers. But I think that maybe at a certain point, maybe with the Public Safety Committee or something, we could have a discussion, because I'd love to give a presentation on what truly is boots on the ground. I think we get too caught up in the historical past that boots on the ground are an actual officer with a badge and a gun taking a call for service. Like right now, I could tell you this morning, the union called and they were upset because we have some of our field officers taking more traffic accidents. Because for the next couple of months, we're trying an experiment. We're going to have our traffic officers, instead of take traffic accidents at the peak hours of the day when people are going to and from work and driving the way they do in Albuquerque, that instead of them taking accidents those times, we're going to really focus and we're going to hammer home citations. Our goal is to really change driving behavior. So in terms of boots on the ground, those traffic units are direct boots on the ground during that time to increase the amount of traffic citations that we're going to be issuing during those time periods. We've increased the number of PSAs. We have 10 graduating next week. We already have 10 more in the pipeline. We're hoping to start the next 10. We have 28 more. We're hoping in May we could really take a big jump. So if council would like at some point in time, just make a request. I'd really like to talk about what boots on the ground are. When I talked about the video review unit, in the past, our officers spent 2-3 hours trying to look for video related to an accident or a crime, and they don't have to do that anymore. They put in the queue the request for the video review unit. These civilians go the next day, and that's all they do is collect all the video and get it tagged into the officer's queue. So I think we're trying to be very innovative, and we're trying to think outside the box, because one thing I'm sure of, since 1995, when I arrived at this department, we have been short sworn officers. Every single mayor, every single city council has said, how are we going to get to the number that we want? We got there one time in 26 years, and it didn't last. So I think we also have to start looking at how we could be creative to get the resources we need and to give our officers the support. The unit with the SHIELD unit, prime example. When I got back here in 2017, Raul showed me the office with all the incomplete cases that had been turned in by field services. Those 18 paralegals have greatly improved the ability for officers to go back into service and have had doubled our indictment rate according to the LFC report that came out shortly afterwards. So I look forward to the request, and hopefully we could sit and give some updates on what boots on the ground truly means in today's day and age, and how we can't just focus on the number of officers assigned to patrol.
Thank you. So one more, Mr. President, now that he said that, and I promise I'll relinquish control, but so I can speak for myself. Boots on the ground to me means a badge and a marked vehicle coming to help me when I call 911. And I think that's kind of most people's perspective of it, is an officer coming to help, or a PSA coming to help, an actual human being who has been trained within the department or any other department who comes to help them when they call in the case of an emergency. That to me is what I'm looking for when I say boots on the ground. So I would love a presentation about it, but I guess whatever I need to ask, if you can educate me to later on how do I need to phrase the question instead of me saying boots on the ground if that's not accurate. But I think that, you answered it already. The expected number to retire this year is probably 30. We don't need to talk about expectations at this point anymore, at least as far as my opinion. I would love to hear at the end of February, in March, to hear how many did we get, how many did we lose in the end, and how many are serving our community as far as going to some kind of crime or case or investigation or some kind of response call when people call for help. That would be awesome. And thank you. And I'm now done.
Councilor Lewis.
Mr. President, Chief, several questions. One, you mentioned, just real briefly, you mentioned a change in the take-home policy. I know we've always had that take-home policy for marked police vehicles. What was that change that you made a few years ago?
President Benton, Councilor Lewis, several years ago, we made a decision to change take-home policy so officers could use their car as they needed with certain guidelines off duty. Previous to that, they could use it to go to the gym, to go to court, to go to work. We expanded the ability and opened the ability for them to use it more frequently, go to the grocery store, go to the movies. There are some guidelines in there. We developed a policy for it. Obviously, if they're going to be drinking, they're not going to be taking their police car and it's not approved. But that was done in terms to ensure that we had more visibility of our marked cars out in the community.
And Chief, I think the number one complaint that I get, just no matter where I go, is we just don't see our officers anywhere. I mean, our people in this city say that when they're driving to work, they don't see officers on the road. When they're at work, when they're at their place of business, they don't see an officer present. When they're at home, they don't see the presence of our officers. And a lot of that has to do with, again, marked police cars, officers with badges, community policing that we've talked about a lot over the years. But that is really, I think, what's right at the forefront. And that has to do with the amount of officers that are on the streets. But what I want to ask you is do you have benchmarks? I mean, are you working off a set of goals and benchmarks? If it has to do with, say, violent crime, my understanding is that we're about double the national average in violent crime right now. What is your benchmark? Is it the national average? What are the goals that you're moving your department to move forward? When it comes to auto thefts, is it to get under the national average? When it comes to the number of police officers that you want on the streets, what is that number? What is the benchmark? What defines success? I don't think in any sense of the word that we can say that we are successful when it comes to violent crime in this city. I think it's been a long time since we've been able to say that this department has been successful in hiring the amount of police officers that we need in our city. When it comes to auto thefts, when it comes to drug-related crimes, been a lot of talk by your boss over the last few years about how we're not going to go to the state legislature to solve our problems. And so what I think what we need, and a lot of the counselors are talking about this, I think this is where a lot of these questions are going, is how do you define success? And what are your benchmarks? And what are your processes? What are you doing? What are your processes every day that you're leading the department to do to be able to hit those benchmarks? And then when you come before this council, it's what do you need? We're going to do a budget here pretty soon. And we're probably going to give you everything you asked for when it comes to financially to be able to lead that department. But along with that is going to come, what are your goals? How do you define success? And how are we, meeting those goals? What are you doing to lead that department to be able to meet those benchmarks? And so if the answer to that is another presentation that we're talking about, then please, I would love to see a presentation of progress, of benchmarks and goals and success, where we want to be and how we're getting there. I think you actually, you answered that question in some ways with some substance, type, processes that you're going through, but I'd love to see that. I do see a lot of excuses too, to be honest. I know you say we don't want to do excuses, but we talk about other cities. We talk about the state legislature. We talk about, things that need to happen that are totally beyond your control and beyond the control of our officers. But Chief, did you get a raise? Or did you get a raise this past year or in this last agreement? You and your staff?
President Benton, Councilor Lewis, yes, I did get a raise.
That's good. I'm glad for you. And you mentioned that that your officers got a raise, that your rank and file got a raise, and you were very clear that you wanted to hold them accountable, that you wanted to see the changes. You wanted to see them work, right? I mean, I think you mentioned that you want to see your rank and file get to work. In fact, you mentioned that some of them have been a little bit lazy, I think, and you want to see them get to work, right? And you want to see them make the changes that are made. Who's holding you accountable for that? And how are you accountable for meeting your goals for that raise that you just got?
President Benton, Councilor Lewis, I think there are a lot of benchmarks that we have, and I think we have to look and be honest of an assessment of where we're at. One of our goals is to improve our criminal investigations. When I came back in 2017, and from that point in 17 all the way to 20, I watched us miserably fail in the courts and case after case go down the tube. One of our benchmarks was first to get our detectives all investigated, trained, and made sure that they're doing strong criminal investigations. We've completed the first 2 detective academies, and we're already seeing the fruits of that. We've made leadership changes to go from a reactive model to a proactive model. In terms of benchmarks, one of our first benchmarks is obviously we have to reduce the number of homicides. I personally would like to see us go under 100 homicides for this next year as a first step. Is it perfect? No. But is it going to take us time to get to where we'd like to be? Absolutely. In terms of auto theft, I've had the same auto theft goal since 2017, and we've slowly made progress towards it. In 2010 and 11, it's some of the first time that the city of Albuquerque wasn't in the top 10 for auto theft. I think it's 2011. I had just left auto theft halfway through that year, and we worked hard to get auto theft numbers down. And we've worked hard over the last 4 years to go from number 1 to number 6. So we'll continue to work hard to ensure that we continue to reduce our rankings in certain areas. In terms of goals for staffing, there are goals for staffing. The goals for staffing is simple. I'd like 1,200 officers and then do an assessment of where we're at. How are we going to get to the 1,200 officers is an important question. One of the things that we've been working on and that we've talked to council about is I'd like to overstaff our most successful venue of hiring police officers is, and that's public service aides. And I've spoken to several counselors about that, and that's why we're trying to overstaff to 100 PSAs. If I could get 100 PSAs over the next 2 years to become police officers, that's a big pool of what we need to do. I know that we need approximately 150 to 170 officers to come in the front door each of the next 3 years in order for us to make up for attrition and for separations from the city so that we could hit that goal of 1,200. So I'd love to sit at some point in time. We could discuss what these goals are. We could always talk about how we're moving forward on them. But I also want to ensure that we remain in motion and that we recognize that we may have to modify things. We may have to change things at time to time. Sometimes things are outside of our control. For example, we were hoping to start 10 people at CNM this spring. 8 didn't pass PT. The academy did everything they can to get them prepared, but they just didn't pass. We've recycled them and we're picking them up in the next class. And we're hoping that we will start 60 in our next APD class in the summer. We're hoping that we start 60 in the fall. And we're hoping that we get 20 more laterals. It still leaves us a little bit short of that 150 to 160, 170 number we want, but we're getting closer and closer. So I look forward to having these types of conversations, and those are just a little bit of some of the goals we have as a department. And in terms of who holds me accountable, I work for the mayor. I'm appointed by the mayor, and the mayor and the CAO hold me accountable, and they meet with me and get updates from me frequently.
Mr. President, I'll defer back to Councilor Sanchez. Or to you, sir.
Thank you. I did see, Councilor Pena, do you have a question for the chief also? And then we'll get back to Councilor Sanchez.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, Chief, just by your responses, you can tell that you've really been working really hard. I just want to say in our district, you know, our commander retired, and then we have a new commander, Commander Barraza. And I just want to say just the passion in your voice and everything that you're doing. I know that this is a national issue, but as everyone here has stated, this is an issue for our Albuquerque and the citizens of Albuquerque. And Commander Barraza, you can really see some of the changes that have occurred. There's some houses that I get calls on a regular basis, and I actually got a few calls this past weekend of some of the work that you've been doing in those problem areas, and with the encampments that we've persistently had move around here in the district, gotten a lot of calls on the fact that they were cleaned up. I really appreciate the fact that, and I know I've talked with I think it was Councilor Bassan, just about how we, you know, people who are responsible, and the laws on the book right now say that people responsible for the cleanup of the properties are the property owners themselves, you know, and when they're left with that burden of that tremendous cleanup, it's really difficult. So I appreciate that work of getting, you know, the laws that are on the books that we can enforce, in addition to the PRT and providing the services that we need, that all those things are happening. So, you know, I definitely can see progress. I just want to commend Commander Barraza. And I think that this is difficult work. And as you mentioned as well, I think that when we talk about issues and what we need to be addressed, is that I always say that officers come in and it's reactive, right? It's after the fact. And I think a lot of the community policing and doing what we need to do as a community, as a city, to address some of the root causes in our community are paramount. And that's when we're really going to see the changes that we need. So I look forward to making sure that we get that Gateway Center up and going. And hopefully, you know, as a council, we can make sure that we put the necessary additional dollars, because that's only one component of a much larger picture that we need to do to address the issues that we have in our community. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Sanchez, back to you.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. President Benton, I have the last question goes back to what Chief Medina was asking, and that question was, we're going to get out there, we're going to do the job, we're going to do what needs to be done, but we still have some confusion out there. I'm speaking on behalf of some of the officers that have contacted me, and also an anonymous letter that came to my office, and probably to several other counselors' offices, but mostly it's the officers. The officers are out there trying to do their job, very, very, very shorthanded, as Councilor Bassan was talking about, and boots on the ground. And also, they're dealing with this confusion. You touched on a little bit, Chief. It's the confusion that the officers are having between handling the McClendon and also the DOJ issues, combined with use of force investigations that, by the way, are 667 in the hole, and also getting out there and doing it, doing the job that they're supposed to do. They feel that if they go out there and start taking back the city, then they could be disciplined for McClendon, use of force, other things, and also DOJ issues. And then we also have the fact that it could go the other way around. If you're out there dealing with McClendon or use of force, then you're going to have that issue with taking back the streets. So the officers are expressing to me the confusion. So my question is do you have a special order how are you dealing with that confusion that the officers are facing right now as they go out there and try to take back the city?
President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, first on the issue of anonymous letters, I've been dealing with anonymous letters since June of 2020. And I foresee that I'll deal with anonymous letters and anonymous complaints till the day I retire. It's just part of the job. It's just something that comes along with it. Those of you working on the CPOA amendment, I commend you, and I hope that we could get some clarification there, because that's one of the things that you talk about morale. Our officers go through investigations over anonymous letters, and sometimes there's not even a victim. And I hope that we can find some middle ground there, and I hope that council is able to assist us with what exactly needs to be done, because it is tough for our officers. As terms of crime, those officers went to you with a variety of problems they're having. I chalk them all up to the excuses I spoke about. I think Councilor Lewis spoke about that. Is like there's no time for excuses. Our officers need to get back to work. They get paid very well. No officer is going to get in trouble if they're following the policy, if they're doing what's asked. Deputy Chief Brown worked with city legal. He's spoken to the commanders. He gave them directive. The officers have directive. It's a lot of interpretation. And Deputy Chief Brown and myself and the administration, if one of these officers get in trouble, ultimately we're able to talk to the superintendent and say, no, this officer is doing what they were supposed to do, or the policy would clearly show it. So I think that we really have to put our foot down. We have to make sure that everybody's going back to work. This is a problem going on nationwide. A lot of industries are seeing people not wanting to return to work. And we got to make sure our well-compensated officers are doing everything they can. And we cannot open the door to excuses. You know what, Councilor Sanchez, you and I both were officers in this department. And if there's one thing I think we both know is we're never going to keep every officer happy. I went to an officer-involved shooting last week, and I said, hey, how are things going? And his remark was, as long as we're a blue state, things are never going to be good. I can't wait to retire to leave. I can't change that officer's mind because his beliefs are in politics, not in what's going on here. So you know what? I recognize that I'm not going to keep every officer happy. I'd go crazy if I tried to keep every officer happy. There is no excuse. Officers have to work. We have to hold them accountable. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from the officers that I talk to every day that are telling me, Chief, there's a lot of officers working hard. Please address the officers that aren't and make sure sergeants are holding people accountable. So the directives go out, the policies are in writing. And if any officer has any specific questions to a specific policy, you talk about McClendon. McClendon was addressed with the commanders from the deputy chief at the field. At a later time, I could set up a meeting with you and the deputy chief of the field, and he could fully explain every single part of his directive to the commanders to you. But we have to continue to do everything we can to keep the city safe.
Chief, President Benton, I just got this other question and comment. I just can't help but wondering and feeling, if I was an officer sitting here hearing what you just said in reference to getting back to work, in reference to the confusion, is there a special order, something that the officers can look at, something that's in writing that states that they can go back and do their job so that they can make sure that they can be officers again?
President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, if we need to do a special order that says officers should be doing their job, I think we're in a sad state. For us to have to put in paper, go do your job, is just very disappointing. Like I said, the vast majority of officers are doing their job. They're hardworking. They take the calls every day, day in, day out. They're working overtime shifts. Those officers ask that we hold accountable everybody else and that we make sure that everybody's taking their calls. We all know that there's officers who sometimes didn't take as many calls as the rest, and we're listening to our officers to make sure everybody goes back to work. I don't think we need a special order that says go back and do your job.
What they're looking at is just making sure that they have the protection to go back and do their job. And that's the biggest issue that I am seeing. And that's why I was wondering if there was a special order, or how you decided to to go ahead and push the agenda of taking back the streets so that every officer is clear that they can go back and they can do their job. Obviously, there's issues that they have to do it right and do it by the book according to SOP, but they're looking and they're worried about the damned if I do, damned if I don't scenario, and that's the biggest issue, and that's what I'm worried about with the officers as well.
President Benton, Councilor Sanchez, thank you.
Chief, I think we need to wrap this up. This has been the equivalent of a study session, and maybe we need another one so that we can have a more free-flowing discussion. And of course, we do have a committee for these matters as well, but we've spent the equivalent of an hour on this Q&A, and we need to move on with the agenda. So I'm going to end the Q&A period at this time.